The Supreme Court has just announced that it is refusing the effort from Donald Trump's team to stay a decision on Trump's sentencing in his hush money criminal case here in New York, scheduled for Friday. Again, the Supreme Court now refusing to stop former President Trump's sentencing. The president-elect was scheduled to be sentenced after being found guilty on 34 felony counts for falsifying business records as it related to so-called hush money payments to the former porn star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. You'll recall during the summer of 2024, during footage like this, when the former president was coming to and from a criminal courtroom here in New York, that he vehemently denied the allegations against him. But ultimately, a jury of his peers found him guilty of falsifying business records. And that preceded the election, where most American voters found they still wanted him to become the next president of the United States. So it set up this highly unusual moment in American history where an incoming president would be sentenced in a criminal case in New York. So before Friday's sentencing, Donald Trump's legal team actually requested that the Supreme Court intervene and stop the sentencing on the grounds that the Supreme Court ruled that a president cannot be held accountable, or even a former president, for any actions that are part of an official act of a presidency. And so, as we look into the decision from the Supreme Court, we can read you a portion of it now. And it essentially says that the application for stay has been denied. And it says it's being denied for two reasons. First, and I'm quoting here, the alleged evidentiary violations at President-elect Trump's state court trial can be addressed in the ordinary course on appeal. So the Supreme Court saying that it does not need to intervene in this sentencing because any of the issues that the president-elect has can be addressed on ordinary course on appeal. The second reason the Supreme Court provides is that, quote, the burden that sentencing will impose on the president-elect responsibilities is relatively insubstantial in light of the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. Now, that's a reference to the latest developments out of this criminal court in Manhattan, where Judge Juan Merchan has said that it is likely that the sentence imposed on President-elect Trump will be what is described as an unconditional discharge. Moments ago on the Daily Report, we had a conversation about what that means, and it effectively means that Trump, as someone who has no prior criminal record, no previous incidents, and of course, being a man of high stature as a former president and now as an incoming president, wouldn't have been sentenced to jail time. You're seeing an image of Judge Juan Merchan here. And so the Supreme Court is effectively saying that because the punishment will be an unconditional discharge, and because it estimates that Trump's concerns can be addressed on the normal course of appeal, it is now denying Trump's effort to have the Supreme Court intervene. Our CBS News legal contributor, Jessica Levinson, joins us now with more on this. Jessica, after so many months of watching the trial and calling it unprecedented, moments before sentencing, this is a remarkable development, but help us better understand this decision by the Supreme Court.
Well, I think it's in some ways a non-decision. They're saying, no, we're not going to take this up. We're not going to push pause. We're talking about a state criminal case. And we know that you, President Trump, have asked us to intervene on, frankly, I think some somewhat creative theories that a president-elect is entitled to immunity in addition to a president. And they, I think, very predictably decided not to get involved because there really is not a live federal question right now. This was an invitation for them to take up, I believe, an issue outside the scope of their previous decision. So as people know, President Trump was convicted in the hush money case. He is now set to be sentenced tomorrow morning. He had gone to the Supreme Court and other courts saying, pause this sentence, don't sentence me. And part of his theory was that based on the Supreme Court's decision, that presidents can enjoy immunity from criminal prosecution, that he, as the president elect, should enjoy immunity from sentencing.
So what then does this mean when it comes to sentencing come Friday? They do note that, Judge Juan Merchan has indicated that the sentence will likely be an unconditional discharge. Help us better understand what that means and why the Supreme Court feels it's significant in this decision.
Well, I think what we're looking at here is a sentence that will feel to a lot of people, frankly, like a non sentence. We do have somebody who is convicted of 34 felony counts. Now, let's remember that these were non-violent felonies. And in any situation, any defendant might not face prison time based on a conviction like this. But add into that we're talking about the past and future president, and that inauguration is less than 2 weeks away, and there is basically no chance of jail time. All of which to say, the sentence here will be a sentence that is a slap on the wrist. It will be a blemish. It will be, frankly, nothing more than an acknowledgement that there was a conviction in this case. But I think for a lot of people, it will feel like there's no real practical consequence other than the fact that the president is a convicted felon and that is now on his record.
And so just to be clear, has President-elect Trump now, with this decision, run out of options to try and delay tomorrow morning's sentencing?
So I want to be careful here, but I believe that when it comes to both the federal system, he's gone to the top of the federal system, that's the US Supreme Court, and he has also asked New York state courts to intervene as well. I believe that he has exhausted those appeals at this point. Now, I'm being very careful here, one, because this is a occupational hazard of attorneys. We always hedge a little bit, but also because there always could be a 11th hour filing. So I want to be careful, but it is 7:30 on the East Coast. Sentencing is happening tomorrow morning. I think sentencing is going ahead. I really do.
And we do know that Trump has used every legal avenue available to him in every way, shape, and form as it relates to this and the other former cases he was facing. Jessica, help us understand then what will happen come Friday morning. If this is an unconditional discharge, will the incoming president have a parole officer? What are likely to be the terms of a sentence?
Well, I think an unconditional release means that there won't be conditions. So I do not believe that we are looking at a situation where, again, we've ruled out jail time. We've ruled out things like parole. We've ruled out things like ankle bracelets. I think we have essentially ruled out any sort of limitations. And that is because we're not talking about any other defendant. We are talking about somebody who is about to be the head of the executive branch. So, look, Judge Merchan has discretion to add conditions if he wants to, but unconditional, many things in the law aren't as they sound. This is one of those situations where it typically is. It means that there are not strings attached. And when it comes to this case, I think for a little bit of context, this is not the type of case where you would typically see prison time, again, because it's a nonviolent felony. But we do have a situation where there were aggravating factors based on how the former president conducted himself and particularly attacks that he made on the judge and his staff. So I think in another world where maybe he was not reelected, there was the possibility of at least some small amount of prison time. That's a very far distance from what we will see tomorrow morning.
It is 7:30 here on the East Coast. I'm Errol Barnett at the CBS Broadcast Center. I'm speaking with legal contributor Jessica Levinson on the breaking news that the Supreme Court has decided it will not stop President-elect Donald Trump's sentencing scheduled to take place Friday as it relates to the guilty verdict in his so-called hush money case. And Jessica, the Supreme Court in justifying its decision makes 2 points: that the president-elect can address his concerns on the ordinary course of appeal, and it says it also reached this decision because of Judge Juan Merchan's suggestion that Trump ultimately will be given an unconditional discharge, which you've helped us understand effectively, to most people would look like no punishment. Are Supreme Court correspondent Jan Crawford also shares her interpretation of what the Supreme Court means in saying that, in almost suggesting that Judge Merchan should stick to his word. What do you make of that analysis of these 2 points?
Exactly the same thing. Jan is the gold standard. She knows exactly what she is talking about. I think that is 100% correct. That what the Supreme Court is really saying is you're very worried, it seems, that there will be some interference with the president's ability to do his job. But Judge Merchan has said that there will be an unconditional release. So essentially, what is the interference that you're concerned about? Why is it that we would need to get involved here? I'm really just repeating what Jan pointed out, and a question that you asked me before, which is I think that the Supreme Court's decision not to intervene is in part based on the idea that this will be a sentence that doesn't look much like the type of sentence we're used to.
I understand that we have not yet heard from President-elect Trump on this decision. We have some footage of Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach, Florida right now.